My name is John Everett.
And John, what is your date of birth?
February the 25th, 1946.
And where were you born?
I was born 15 miles southeast of McCrory, Arkansas on a rice farm.
Okay. And John, just to make sure, I want to be sure that we have your permission for the city of Prairie Grove to use this interview for its oral history project.
You do.
Thank you, John. Tell me, who were your parents?
My parents were John and Lucille Everett.
And tell me about your family when you were growing up as a child and your siblings.
My dad was a rice farmer in Woodruff County, Arkansas. We grew up on a rice farm about 15 miles from a very small town called McCrory. We were out in the swamps. We had very little social contact. There were 5 siblings, 1 girl, 4 boys. I'm the second in line.
Okay, and so your family business was farming?
Yes, sir.
Did you have any other family business besides that?
No.
Tell us about your part in the family business.
Well, I left when I got out of high school, and my part up to then was just common labor. They told me what to do, and I tried to do it.
So tell me, where did you go to college?
I went to college at Arkansas Tech in Russellville, Arkansas. That's where I went to school.
And what about law school?
Went to law school at the University of Arkansas Law School.
Okay. So tell me about your decision to move to Prairie Grove. When did you first tell me, what did you do when you got out of law school?
Well, when I was in law school, I joined the United States Navy JAG Corps and was on inactive duty the last 2 years I was in law school. When I graduated law school and passed the bar, I then went on active duty, so I spent 3.5 years in the Navy JAG Corps after law school. I don't know that I really made a decision to come to Prairie Grove. I went to law school with a man named Bill Thurman. The last 2 years in the Navy, I was in Adak, Alaska, which is a very small island about 1,500 miles west of Anchorage. So I came to Prairie Grove because Bill Thurman said he needed help, and he guaranteed me enough to buy groceries and pay the light bill. So I came here to see where I wanted to go next, and I never did want to go anywhere else, so I stayed.
Okay, so tell me about when you started your practice here in Prairie Grove. What was it like?
Well, Bill Thurman had started the practice. We graduated law school at the same time, so his practice was 2 or 3 years old, and he had the good fortune to be a wealthy man, or at least married to a wealthy woman, so he wasn't dependent on the law practice for income. I, however, was, so it was a 2-man law practice, and we all read abstracts and represented the bank in foreclosure cases and handled default divorces and stuff that really was not too complicated.
Tell me about, what year was this when you came to Prairie Grove?
1974, January the 9th.
So what do you remember about downtown Prairie Grove and the businesses and the people there?
Well, it was much different than it is now. Now, as you know, a bunch of antique stores. There were 2 drug stores. There was a 5 and 10 cent store. The gas company had a building downtown. The bank was much smaller, but it had recently been renovated. It was a nice place. And there was a grocery store in Prairie Grove, on downtown Prairie Grove. It was the B&K Grocery. There was a little hamburger joint next to the grocery store. The grocery store is where the Daisies and Olives place is now.
Who was the mayor at the time?
I don't know that I know. I don't know. I don't remember.
So what you said you represented the bank, Farmers and Merchants Bank?
Yes.
So tell me about the kind of work you did for the bank and the name of the bank.
Mostly it was real estate stuff, making sure the titles to the real property that they were taking a mortgage on were okay. So we call that reading abstracts. They don't do that anymore. But we would take an abstract of title and examine it to ensure that the property owner really did have good title and he really could mortgage it to the bank. We did a lot of that. Occasionally we would foreclose a mortgage or help them repossess a washing machine or a car or something like that.
So who was managing and running the bank at that time?
Well, the head man was Delford Reef. He was assisted by his son Jim Reef, and there was a gentleman named Wilford Thompson who seemed to swing with a powerful stick down there.
And the bank name?
Farmers and Merchants Bank of Prairie Grove.
What other kind of cases did you handle when you were here?
Well, we handled divorce cases. We handled misdemeanor DWIs and wife beating and kid beating and about anything we could. Zoning problems, barking dogs at night and violating city ordinances and all that sort of stuff. It was a pretty pedestrian law practice.
So where did you try most of your cases, or where were most of your cases? Were they in local court, or were they in Washington County? Or tell me about that.
If you use numbers, you would say most of them were in municipal courts, what was called municipal courts back in those days. If you viewed them in matters of importance, you would say we tried most of them, perhaps all of them, in either circuit court in Washington County or chancery court in Washington County in Fayetteville. Back in those days, the circuit court and the chancery court were different. They were divided.
What are some of your earliest memories when you came to Prairie Grove?
Oh, I remember that the people were nice. I remember there were a couple of really good beer joints out west of Prairie Grove. One was Al's Tavern, the other was L.M. Madden's joint, and I can't remember the name of it, but the Shamrock Club, right, the Shamrock Club. I spent quite a bit of time out there. There were good churches. My memory is that the leadership of Prairie Grove was made up of young people, which I thought was a good thing. And we fit in pretty well to Prairie Grove society at the time. It was not high profile or highfalutin. It's pretty common people.
What about the school? What was the school like?
The school was great. It was much smaller, of course, than it is now. But my kids were not in school when I came here, but when they got old enough to go to school, I thought they were well educated and well cared for, and I was proud of the school and still am.
Okay, tell me about your kids.
I had two kids when I came. One was Cole, who was 4 years old when I came. My daughter Amy was about 3 months old when I came, and they lived here and were educated here and got married and finally left here.
They both graduated from Prairie Grove?
They did. As I got older, I remarried, and I have a stepson named Jackson Diebold, who was likewise educated in the Prairie Grove school system.
Tell me about some of your friends and your associates that you knew when you worked here in Prairie Grove.
Well, I guess the people I was closest to were the Bartholomew's, Billy Joe and Dwight Bartholomew, their dad Argel, Bill Thurman, my law practice, his wife Jennifer, and they had 5 or 6 kids, all of whom I knew well. Kenny Bartholomew was their cousin who ran the B&K grocery across the road. Larry Bell was the pharmacist. Gary Davis was another pharmacist. Hewlin Nations was a sawmiller. He was my very close friend and still is. His wife Nancy, now deceased, but at the time alive, was a very good friend of mine, probably my closest friend. And that's who comes to mind.
What would y'all do for fun or for entertainment?
That's a very good question. I eat at people's houses. There was no golf course here. Some people played golf. I did not. Play cards occasionally, visit, just go to church, go to school functions, watch the kids play out in the yard. That was about it.
What did kids do for fun? What did your kids do for fun?
Well, they played outside. They climbed trees. They rode bicycles. They played at each other's houses. That's what they did. There was no swimming pool. There was no organized kids' activities either through the city or the church. Occasionally, the church would have like a day where the kids would go to church and play hula hoops or whatever they played. I don't really know. But not predictably and not commonly.
Tell me about the church you attended.
When we came here, we went to the Presbyterian church. That's what we had gone to before we got here. And we attended Presbyterian church for a long time, up till about 1983 or 1984.
Let's talk about the Battlefield Park. What was it like when you came here, and then how has it changed over the years? Well, the Battlefield Park was much smaller when I first came here, and it was well used. It was historic, and everybody knew that it was. I don't know that there was a park. There was a staff of park rangers and administrative people that took care of it. If there was, I don't remember it. One of the things I remember about the Battlefield Park is that on Labor Day, as you know, they have a festival there, and did when I came here, but
when I came, all the men in the community would go to the park the night before Saturday and build a fire pit upon which the chicken would be cooked by netting strung over some cross ties, and you get out there real early in the morning and barbecue that chicken and serve it till you ran out of chicken. We served a lot of it. I don't know how many half chickens we had, but there's several hundred pieces.
What else would y'all do at the Battlefield Park?
Well, most of the time we used it just as a park. You'd take the kids over there and play on the swings or walk around and enjoy the outdoors. And that was pretty well it. There was no pavilion, there was no walking trail. It was just an open area that was pleasant and shady and friendly.
Let's talk about some of the other people that you got to know that were influential in Prairie Grove that had a big part in the local scene. Can you think of some people that
Well, the earliest mayor I knew was Emmett Davidson, who was a kind of a hands-on city administrator. He was kind of a crusty old bastard, but a nice guy. Dr. Manning and was important in city matters. I got to know Eva Rigall well, who was Dr. Frank Rigall's widow. He had died by the time I got here. She was an admired lady in the community. Jeff Baggett and his wife Frances and their daughter Carol and their other daughter Judy were friends of mine, and I came to know them very well and respected them and still do.
What about the local newspaper back then?
Well, my memory, the Prairie Grove Enterprise, I think was the name of it. I don't know if it was owned by my friend Boyce Ray Davis or not. I think it probably was not, though at various times I think he did have an ownership interest in it. The guy I remember that actually ran the paper was named Richard Lehman, who's been dead now for several years. It also had a printing shop down there that was running in connection with the paper, where you go down and get your flyers printed and that sort of thing. But it was a pretty small and not very interesting paper. Might have been profitable, but I read it pretty regularly.
What about the local phone company, or were you familiar with?
Oh, sure. When I got here, Donald and Barry Parks, twins, ran the phone company and continued to run it up until they died, which hadn't been all that long ago, really. One of their sons, David Parks, who was the son of one of the two twins, took over the management of the phone company. Back in the 80s sometime, I think Rick Reed became the manager of the phone company, maybe in the 90s, I forget, and he was kind of the first among equals down there. That's about all I remember about it. When I got here, where I came from, we had party lines, and some people don't have telephones at all, but when I got here, everybody had their private line, which kind of impressed me as being a progressive sort of thing.
Tell me about the civic pride that people had and kind of the type of community it was here when you came.
Well, people live in Prairie Grove have always kind of been proprietary and proud of Prairie Grove. They still are. People that live here pay their taxes and generally do right and pay their debt and raise their kids, and they're friendly to each other. It's always been a bedroom community for Fayetteville, but we have kind of thought that we had some independence from Fayetteville. Still think we do. It's a great place to raise kids and to live. That's why I never left after I came here in 1974. I came to look around, see where I wanted to go, and didn't go, and I'm still here, and I'm proud I am.
What else can you think about the history of Prairie Grove that maybe you want to say that I haven't asked about, or some other stories that come?
And I don't know. When I came here, the grocery store was Dillon's, and it kind of went out of business and was bought by Harps. It seemed like, comparing then to now, there was more commercial activity around Prairie Grove. We didn't have liquor stores as we do now. And maybe we didn't have the one stop, but we had hamburger joints and Mexican food joints and a grocery store, which was important. We had two grocery stores, actually, the B&K, and Dillon's also was a grocery store at the time. And I just kind of feel like there was a little more commercial activity around Prairie Grove, and more people actually came to town to do something besides look for antiques and flea market items. I don't really, I mean, I remember just stories of Prairie Grove. I remember back in the late 70s that the city of Prairie Grove passed an ordinance saying you had to keep your dogs up in April every year because the mayor thought that all dogs came in heat in April. And there were some cases we tried about whether that made any sense or not. It did not. But we didn't have a leash law except in April. You had to keep your dogs up, according to Mayor Davidson in the city of Prairie Grove. The city government was more accessible back in those days. You could go down there and talk to the J.G. Ward was the mayor at one point, and Dr. Manning was the mayor, and his wife was the mayor, and they were more accessible. Now, you know, in order to actually talk to anybody down there, you got to go through some falderall to get to it a guy that can make a decision. Or they'll give you information. They're a little more closed-mouthed about things.
What about the courts? So you did a lot of business in the courts. Can you think of any interesting cases or interesting stories that you could share about that? Maybe some funny ones?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a really good time in court. The first case I ever tried on the merits involved a turkey farmer named Wayne Farr, who's now deceased. Wayne Farr lost a lot of his turkeys, and he had sued Ralston Purina alleging that the turkey food was contaminated and caused his turkey to die. And I was trying that case against a lawyer named Frank Waters, who became a United States District Court judge, now deceased also. And Mr. Farr was testifying that he kept up with the mortality rates on his chicken flocks. Every time they died, he'd write down on a little paper how many died that day. And then Frank Waters became Judge Waters, cross-examining Mr. Farr, said, "Mr. Farr, what caused the mortality rate on this flock number 4 to be 98%? And Wayne Farr kind of looked at him quizzically as though he was an idiot and said, "Well, hell, they all died." So that'll run that mortality rate right up there on you, boy. That was the testimony. I didn't know you could laugh in court back in those days, but man, I thought that was funny. Judge did too. There's been other things like that over the years, people giving funny answers or silly answers, but that's kind of representative.
How did the case turn out?
Wayne didn't get any money. No, we lost the case straight away, as we should have. I tried that case about 2 weeks after I got out of the Navy. It's the first time I'd ever been to a civilian court in my life. First case I ever saw tried, I tried it. First jury trial I ever saw, I tried it.
So what did you learn working as an attorney in Prairie Grove?
A lot of people would say not much, but I guess the idea is that I learned that the law had a more practical side of it than what you learn in law school, that it's not a matter of reading a book and figuring out what the law is, but it's trying to take a fact situation and figure out how you can help people or make it right or at least make it go away, which is sometimes about all you can do. I also learned and still believe that people can create some enormous indignities to other people for nonsensical reasons, mostly emotional. That's pretty well what I've learned, I guess. So
tell me about when you left Prairie Grove and moved your practice to Fayetteville, and why you made that decision, and then. Well, that was in 1993. I had practiced in Prairie Grove, in 1991, for 17 years, and I tell people, and it's partly true, that if somebody's dog got run over, they'd come talk to me. If they got run over, they'd go talk to some lawyer in Fayetteville, for after all, they were held a lot smarter in Fayetteville than they are in Prairie Grove. So having recognized that, I moved my practice to Fayetteville because I thought that was the natural thing to do. By that time, I'd tried a lot of cases, and I don't know if I had any skills in that or not, but thought I did, and some other people thought I did too. So I moved the practice to Fayetteville to get more actively involved in cases that were more significant than some of the ones I handled in Prairie Grove. Well, let's talk about how your reputation over the years, you've kind of become known as one of the top attorneys in the area, if not in the state. Do you think that maybe that move had something to do with it? I doubt it. Yeah, first place, I appreciate you saying that. I'm not sure that's true now, or maybe that was true. But anyway,
There was a time when I just tried a lot of cases. And maybe it was because I was so stupid I couldn't settle them, but maybe it's because I didn't want to settle them. But there was a time when I tried a lot of them. I recall one year I tried 26 cases to a jury to a verdict. That's a lot. I got married to Beth, my wife now, in 1997, I think. And for the 6 months after we got married, I tried 14 cases to a jury verdict. She almost divorced me over that. I tried to persuade her that was just cyclical. It's not always this way. So that's what happened. I mean, I was fortunate enough to try some high-profile cases to a good result. Most of that's just the luck of what kind of cases you get. You know, you can't change the facts and you can't create facts. But back in early 2000, I tried a handful of cases that generated some publicity and managed to get a good result.
Yeah, give us an example of one of those cases.
Well, I tried a kid over in Benton County named Dustin Denton on a capital murder charge back in probably the late 90s. We tried it for 2 weeks. He was acquitted. David Klinger, the prosecutor over there, tells me it's the only capital case he ever lost. But it generated some publicity and some high emotions in Westville and even in western part of Washington County. I tried that case in the late 90s. I tried one of those dog trial cases where you didn't hook your dogs up in April, which generated some publicity in Prairie Grove. That was a fun case. I've tried some cases in federal court here and in Little Rock and in other parts of the state that had some that was kind of high profile.
What would be your best case ever? If you had to say
I don't know.
The best case you ever did?
Well, you know, the one I was kind of proudest of, and I was invited one time to attend a seminar called Top Verdicts. And I explained to the people, you know, I'm not down to talk about a lot of money or all that kind of stuff, but the case I chose to talk about was a case for Priscilla Ferguson. I'm sure she wouldn't mind me telling you this story, but Priscilla had driven her Dodge Polara up to the VA hospital to visit some kinfolks, and a little dog come out of the brush and ran square into the left quarter panel of her Dodge Polara automobile. Caused like $300 worth of damage. We figured out who owned the dog, and Priscilla came in the office and wanted her money, and the guy wouldn't pay her. So I told Priscilla that she just needs to go over to municipal court and sue him herself. You could do that back in those days, and she did, and sure enough she won, and the guy appealed it up to the circuit court, and I told Priscilla the same thing, just go up there and tell the judge your story, and by this time the bill was about $400 because there was some interest on the deal, and Priscilla won there too, and the guy had a lawyer, he appealed it to the Supreme Court. Priscilla came back in the office, and I said, now, Priscilla, at this point it's probably beyond your capability to do, so I'll represent you in this appeal deal. Well, we appealed it, and it was affirmed, and the guy by this time it's up over $500, so the guy wouldn't pay, so Priscilla wanted her money, and I don't blame her, so I sent the sheriff out to gather up the guy's stuff, see if we could sell it and get her money. He didn't have anything, and what he had was mortgaged. But my partner, David Stills, at the time, and I were talking over lunch one time, and Stills says, you know, I bet he still got that little dog. Well, that's a pretty good idea. So I wrote the guy a letter, and I said, look, if you don't pay us $500, I'm going to have a sheriff go out there and pick that dog up. We're going to sell that little dog at the front door of the courthouse. Priscilla's going to buy the dog, and then we're going to cut his throat, which, of course, we wouldn't have done, but that was the threat. Maybe you don't want to hear this. So the guy called me and said, you can't do that. And I said, hell, I can't. Let's see if I can. If you don't pay this by next Tuesday or some day, I'm going to get that little dog. He came in and paid her $523, whatever it was. I thought that was pretty funny. And it was a good result. And that's the case that I made my speech on about top verdicts. A very good result, and it's what should have been done, and that's what happened. I like that case, still do. It was reported in, the judge that wrote that opinion was named Bob Brown. That was the very first opinion he wrote as a Supreme Court judge. And he's written about that case in some of the law journals, about the first case he had and how important it was, and about $521 or something. It was kind of a joke, really. But I kind of liked that case. The other case I liked was a case where a girl down over in Town was out in her own house one night at a party. She was 22 years old, sitting on the tailgate of her pickup drinking a beer in her own house, in her own driveway, in her own pickup. Police come by and give her a ticket for drinking in public, which was kind of funny, I thought. I didn't think that was right, so I represented her, and the judge Story in circuit court found her guilty. I appealed at Supreme Court, involved like a $121 fine. The Supreme Court reversed it and said that you could drink beer on your own house, on your own pickup, if you're more than 21 years old, which I thought was also a good result. I like that case.
What, anything else you can think of that you want to share?
Oh, not really. I've been kind of raised by Prairie Grove people, and they've been very supportive of me and my family, and I'm proud of that and appreciate it.
If you could just tell one story that gives you an example of what kind of a community Prairie Grove is, what something you could tell?
Well, my first wife died, and I had 2 little kids. And I thought about moving. And I'm glad I didn't. I get emotional about this. She committed suicide, as you probably know. And these people helped me through that. Sorry.
What else? What they do? How did the community respond?
They helped me raise my kids. They just provided a shoulder. That's my story.